Now boarding our first class Ultra Gold passengers. Welcome into Other People's Shoes, the podcast that takes you on an extraordinary journey through the lives of others, where empathy knows no bounds. Your host, Neil Matthews, is absolutely thrilled that you're here. Please take your seat as we're about to take flight into season 16. Be sure to hold on tight, because Take Flight isn't just about the skies above. It's about the depths within. We'll dive headfirst into the stories of those who faced turbulence and yet found the strength to rise above it all. So grab your headphones and get ready to soar with us as we launch into season 16. Thank you for flying with us. Buckle up and let's take flight.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. Talking to you from the captain's chair today. We're really embracing the flight mentality here. I hope you're with us. I hope, again, your tray table is in the upright position and your seatbelt is securely fashioned. Today's journey isn't going to take us very far. In fact, we probably should just jump in the Corolla or the Highlander. Probably the Highlander gets better gas mileage. It is a hybrid. After all, we're just going to drive north, really, and see what we can find. And lo and behold, we have found someone. In fact, help me welcome in my new friend, Amanda, here from Oregon. It's so exciting. I'll tone down the excitement. No, I won't. You guys know that. Hang around. Amanda, welcome in. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I love the excitement.
Somebody said to me recently, she said, so your part-time job is you work at the local radio station, right? And I kind of like you had just this moment of like, what? I didn't know what to say to that. She said I had a radio voice. My mom once told me I had a face for radio. I'm not sure what that means.
I'm not sure what a face for radio is either, but hey, we're on podcasting now, right?
That's right. We're not even talking about radio anymore because is there even a radio? Everyone's on XM or Spotify, Pandora. So Amanda, help me with this because I'm excited, one, that you're here today. I'm excited to hear and really how you have truly taken flight in so many respects and how I think you're really going to spur some women on to do likewise. Not that you're the prime example or the elevated person or put me on a pedestal because I'm amazing. Again, you have one of those stories that people need to hear and it needs to be amplified. So Amanda, help us with this though before we get too far down the road. What style of shoe do you love to wear?
Oh, that's a question I wasn't expecting. I'm a flip-flop girl. Born and raised in Hawaii, flip-flops is all I usually wear in the summer. When the snow hits, it's a hard change for me.
Now, is it those Ugg boots? Are you an Ugg boot girl or no? Help me with that. If it's like wintertime, October, February-ish, help me.
I will wear Ugg boots, yes, unless there's too much snow on the ground. They have no grip whatsoever. But yes, Ugg boots or flip-flops are pretty much my primary.
All right. Just wondering. Now, why the flip-flops? I just, listen, I can't get around that. I've been to Hawaii. I spent 10 days there a while back. Yep. Everybody's wearing flip-flops. I'm still wearing my shoes, my Jordans. I couldn't embrace the flip-flop, and I still can't.
Well, Hawaii is very much a barefoot, and so flip-flops are easy on and off. You don't wear shoes inside. I spent most of my childhood actually barefoot. I even took my driving test barefoot. So flip-flops are the barely shoe, essentially.
The barely shoe. I like it.
Yeah.
I think it's because I just have ugly feet is my problem. Is I look down and I'm thinking, God, what did you create down there?
I mean, maybe it just needs some sun. I don't know.
I was playing pickleball recently and somebody said, hey, Neil, you could take your socks off. And I'm like, I'm wearing no-show sock. And he's like, well, you might want to tell your ankles that. I'm excited to hear this take flight story. Where for you does the story truly begin to take flight? For you?
We have to start at the beginning. You understand the situation I was in before I actually began to take flight. We have to go back to 2016 in Colorado. I was a full-time stay-at-home mom, 3 young kids. They were 1, 4, and 5 at the time. I was married. My husband worked long hours, traveled a lot. I thought we just had young kids and my focus was my family. My focus was supporting my husband with his job and being a full-time mom to my little boys. One day, my husband doesn't come home from work. He worked long hours and he often shut his phone off and didn't answer me because he was hyper-focused on whatever he was doing. He'd never not come home before. Called non-emergency dispatch at 5 o'clock in the morning when he still hadn't showed up. And they transferred me over to the jail. And I thought, there's no way he's there. Sure, let's check all the bases. To my greatest shock, they said, yes, we have him. And he had been arrested for attempted human trafficking with a $250,000 bond. And I about dropped the phone because what? What did you say? I'd never even heard of such a charge. I didn't know what it meant. It seemed impossible, out of reach, out of stretch. He worked in IT. He made good money. Like, how is he possibly involved in something like this? There must be some mistake. That spurred the beginnings of what turned into the most challenging next 4 years of my life. Most people assume that I would just leave him and never look back. I had 3 young kids and I had a whole lot of childhood trauma about not having my father around. I couldn't possibly believe that I was married to somebody who would be responsible for anything of the sort. And so I set out to figure out what actually happened because I was determined there must have been some explanation. I am fiercely loyal, and so I really had to learn the truth. So I actually bailed him out of jail. His side of the story was that he had been soliciting adults when there was a sting operation that offered children, an 11 and 14-year-olds. And he thought it wasn't real. That was his story. And that he was going to try to figure out if it was so he could report it. Except he showed up and was arrested. I tried to believe that story, and I told myself that had to be a plausible explanation. And no, I wasn't happy about admitting to solicitation, essentially cheating on me. I also had 3 young kids and was financially dependent on him and his job. It was like, okay, well, we have to get through this. We have to get through this. My kids need their dad in their lives. We have to figure this out. I thought we can come back from infidelity. People recover from that. At least that's what I told myself. Tried my damnedest to support him, to basically isolate myself from anybody who had anything else to say. Focused on just getting through the criminal proceedings. Now, in the state of Colorado, most of the time, and actually truly most states, anybody arrested for human trafficking, child solicitation, things like that, they pretty much get offered plea deals. That is something that's very hard for people to hear. Truth is, most of the time they get off with very limited jail time or none at all. And in my ex-husband's case, he was offered 4 years of probation if he pled guilty to attempted solicitation of a minor. So of course he did. Through the time that he was on bond hearing, we had supervised visitation. Things were really challenging. The kids kept asking to see their dad more. I had this belief that once we got through this, we would figure out how to repair. He would get the help he needed. We could have marriage counseling. He could have help with his sex addictions. I'm still believing this is what's happening. And I can't possibly see that anything else could be true. And on some level, our relationship was actually stronger for a period of time because we were shutting out the outside world. It was just me and him against the court system, essentially, protecting the family and keeping the family together, and pulling on all of my trauma wounding. Once the criminal proceeding was over and he pled guilty, in the state of Colorado, there was a Supreme Court precedent that actually said he now could move back home. The constitutional right to parent does not get removed based on a sex offense unless the child is the victim. And so he was actually allowed to move back into the house and have unsupervised access to our children, which at the time I thought was a good thing. I had hoped he would find some work, we would get some kind of normal, we would get some help, things would go back to kind of what it was. That was what I had in my head. Well, mental health was only deteriorating. He could not focus. He could not do anything. He had lost his job and tried to do some freelancing unsuccessfully. I realized I had to go back to work. My youngest was 2 then at that point. Eventually, I went back to work making half as much as he did. I got to do something here. I went back to work, and as I started to separate from being solely focused on being in this bubble that we had created, I started to see that things weren't as good as I thought. I started to realize I couldn't stay married to somebody who had been cheating on me in that way. I started to feel like there was other women, other people around every time he wanted to be intimate. And I started to pull away. I started to push away. I started to not be okay. The more I did that, the more he got manipulative and tried to gaslight me into staying. This was his safety, was the family as well, and my support. Eventually, I decided that I couldn't stay with him anymore. I wanted to see other people. I wanted to do other things. Told him as much because I wasn't going to go cheat on him like he did. He basically said, you go do you. We'll be weird normal together in the family. I'll stay and help with the kids. You do what you need to. Now, that sounds all great and all. It kept him in the household together. And I started to see the kids' behavior start to change. I started to see he started pushing me out from being home with the kids. And these are the kids that I was home full time with. I had nursed for 3+ years and done really mom bonding stuff with. And seeing my kids start to react differently to me started to bring questions in my mind. What was actually going on? Who was this guy? But at the same time, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to separate my family. I didn't know how to break them apart after I just fought so hard to keep our family together. I really, really struggled to figure out what to do next. And eventually he filed for divorce. He was going to try to kick me out of the house. He was now the primary parent. And so he filed for divorce to try to push me out. It didn't work. That spurred a custody fight that lasted 18 months long and was $75,000 to essentially try to figure out what to do with the children. He wanted 50-50 custody. And I said, absolutely not. You were just arrested for human trafficking, trying to solicit an 11 and 14-year-old. Are you crazy? And he said, well, you supported me. And the court said you supported me. I had to prove that there was something else going on. There was a part of me that didn't trust him and I didn't understand why, what my instincts were telling me. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know how to reconcile this belief that I had to keep my family together and what was staring me in the face. I didn't know how to do that. I hired the lawyers. I hired a parental rights evaluator. We had full psych evaluations. We had all the things done. Ultimately, the court still said, you've supported him, and his probation officer and his therapist says that he's safe. And so it looked like we were going to have 50-50 custody. Now, I didn't like any of that. I tried to come to terms with it, and I tried to figure out, how do I parent my children when we were now sharing custody, going back and forth? How do we parallel parent? Alienation attempts against the children only got worse. They started to get physically violent about hanging around with me. And then the bottom dropped out again. People think it's bad. Your husband's arrested for human trafficking. Bottom dropped out again when I dropped my middle son off for school one day, and out of nowhere, he says, sometimes I suck on daddy's fingers. And I went, what? You can't respond. You can't say anything. You can't do anything. And I started to realize that all of the feelings that I had, all of the uncomfortable things, all of the manipulation and alienation was actually darker than I had been willing to see. I couldn't see how bad his deviances went. I couldn't see how bad his mental health actually was. I couldn't see that my children were actually in danger of being sexually groomed and potentially worse by their father. Now it was staring me right in the face. And this was my rock bottom point. I'm also in the middle of a custody fight where there doesn't seem like there's anything that can be done. My lawyer says we have to tread very carefully here. We have to tread lightly because you can't just file new complaints in the middle of a high conflict divorce case. Eventually, after talking to his therapist, I actually asked my son to show me what that meant. And it was as bad as I feared. And I called Child Protective Services to make a report. They did nothing. They interviewed him and said, oh, everything seems fine. What is going to happen? This is not okay. The court system is not actually protective. And this is a hard one still for me to actually be okay with. Both criminal and family court system is not protective. It's only punitive if you can prove something has happened. I was seeing what was about to happen, terrified that there was nothing I could do about it. I'm in therapy. I'm diagnosed with PTSD. My nervous system is on overdrive. Every single conversation involves a panic attack. Every single transfer of children is high conflict, screaming, all of the things. And my mental health therapist, my regular therapist, says to me, have you ever thought about seeing a psychic? What? You crazy? Like fortune tellers? What? Are they like, huh? She says, no, I know a good one. I know a real one. Well, I mean, I'll try anything. Like I've hired other people. Why the hell not? Right? Sure. I'll go see your lady. And I was willing to try. And I went to go see this lady, got an appointment. Apparently you don't normally get appointments. It's usually a month-long waiting list. I went to see this lady and she sits me down and she says, your angels made you this appointment and sat you in this chair because you have not made a choice yet. I said, what do you mean I made a choice? Like I'm doing all the things. I've hired all the people. And she starts telling me this past life that she's reading of mine, where I was married to him. He even had the same name. In that past life, 500 years ago, his addiction was alcohol and he was physically violent. Energy behind the manipulations and the abuse was the same. It just wasn't physical. In this life, he'd never laid a hand on me. In that life, as soon as we had the kids, things got worse. I tried to step in front of them and protect them. The reasons I stayed, it was like she was in my head over the last 4 years. She all of a sudden was telling me all of the reasons I couldn't be on my own. I couldn't have the kids on my own. I couldn't support them. I had to keep the family together. Hey, lady, I'm listening because that's the stories I've been telling myself. And then she tells me in that life, he threw me down the stairs and beat me to death. And my whole body has this response. And I start to go, okay. And I start to understand that I'm having a fear response that I don't really consciously remember. I was terrified of him and I didn't understand why, because he had never laid a hand on me, but I was starting to understand potentially why. Just you have to get a handle on this fear and you have to make a choice to be done with him for good. And I said, I'm done. She said, no, you have to mean it. And it was in that moment that I realized there was a part of me that didn't want to believe that any of this was true. There was a part of me that still wanted my family together. There was a part of me that thought if I supported him, that he could get the help he needed. And even if we were co-parenting, at least my kids could be okay because they would have their father. There was a part of me that still was denying what was straight in front of me, hoping that I was wrong. And there was a part of me that thought that I could help him in some fashion get better. She said, you have to choose. I said, okay, I see it. I don't even like to admit it to myself, but I see it and I'm choosing, I'm done. And she said, okay, good. I can help you now. I'm like, okay, what do I do? Because I think I'm doing everything. And she says, you have to keep going. There are people who want to help you and everybody knows somebody. And she felt into him and said, he's just digging his hole deeper. He has no desire to get better. He has no desire to face the trauma that he's endured over the lifetimes and lifetimes. He has no desire to see any of it. And you have to keep going. There are people who want to help you, but you have to ask and you have to keep going. I left that session with this new resolve. Like, okay, I understand. I don't don't know what I need to do, but I need to do something. I started asking everybody I could think of, because the truth was I had been hiding. I didn't want anybody to know I was married to somebody arrested for human trafficking. I didn't want to tell anybody my story. I'd hired lawyers and evaluators. Those were all people within the system, and I didn't really talk about it. Didn't want anybody at work to know what was happening. So I went back to work and I started talking. Found out that same day that a girl in my HR department had an uncle who worked for ICE. She called him and he put me in touch with Homeland Security, who put me in touch with the arresting officer back in 2016. He put me in touch with the local police officer who they ran the sting in conjunction with. They opened the case file, the CPS file for me. They re-interviewed my son. They also got a hold of the original arrest report and the original case file from the criminal case. People think you see all of the evidence as a family member. You don't see anything. They hide it from you because maybe it goes to trial. So I didn't see the text transcript, him and the undercover agent. I only knew what he said. All of a sudden, it was staring me straight in the face that this man fully had intent to sleep with an 11 and 14-year-old. He wanted it recorded. He had all of this information. He had all of the lingo. He clearly had done this before. This was no accident. All of this is happening as I'm still trying to trade kids back and forth and gather my evidence, but I am set on a mission. I have this new resolve and I have this understanding that I can't stop. I only lose if I stop. And so everything is happening for me. Every new piece of information is helping me prove my case. If I don't succeed this time, then I just keep going. I started listening to my kids differently. I started recording conversations. I started understanding the trauma they were going through. And then a lot of their reactions and behavior towards me was because of all of that. Instead of being frustrated with them, I was more open to listening and talking to them in a different way. I just kept going. And that meeting with the psychic was January of 2020. Final divorce hearing was end of February of 2020. I had 6 weeks to figure this out. And I went to court with a 3-inch binder stacked full of evidence, full of recordings, full of data. We had the parental rights evaluator do a whole new evaluation. He had multiple psychological diagnoses. We just kept going. We had so much evidence, and I stood in that courtroom and I gave the performance of my life. Needed the judge to understand that I was a protective parent. I wasn't trying to be alienating. I wasn't trying to do anything but protect my kids. That divorce hearing, I had no idea what was going to hit the world in March of 2020 yet. In March 3rd, the actual final orders came out. The judge gave him one more chance. She removed all overnights, giving immediate protection in place. And she gave him 6 weeks to comply with a large list of requirements, including more evaluations, more counseling, all the things. And he did not a single one on that list. And the consequence, per her orders, was that he would only have supervised visitation after that. So in April of 2020, the supervised visitation was enacted. And that was the last time we have heard from him. And everything changed.
I want to make a statement. Lifetime movie couldn't even write that script.
Correct.
ABC couldn't even write that script. Seriously. Wow.
I mean, obviously that's the shortened version, but yes.
Amanda, how are you sitting before me right now and not pulling out your hair, not in some type of insane asylum, in a compound of some sort?
I can tell you, when I succeeded at getting full custody, I felt like I succeeded at the impossible. Nobody, especially today, gets full custody. Most people end up sharing custody with their abusers or their children's abusers. Most people forever in this legal fight. And my lawyers even said, you're just going to have to keep us on retainer. Like, we're sorry, but this is probably what's going to happen. I succeeded at creating an impossible outcome. I created safety and security for myself and my kids. My nervous system got a chance to reset. I got to heal from the PTSD. I don't get triggered like I used to anymore. I got an opportunity to reconnect with my children, back to the connection we used to have. I became their safe place. COVID, the shutdowns, was a hugely healing opportunity because they weren't in school anymore. We were all home. It was most amazing timing. And I felt like I was given an opportunity to show the world what could be possible. It was so loud that I had to write a book, that I had to share my story. The majority of people out there don't succeed at what I succeeded at, and they don't even think it's possible. The amount of shame and guilt that gets held when anybody is connected to these type of crimes. Family members, anybody, or even if it's not that big of a crime, even if it's just staying within an abusive relationship of any kind, the amount of people in gaslighting and abusive relationships is also very high. And I just needed it to mean something. I needed it to all be worth something. And if sharing my story and helping people release their shame and their guilt and their judgment for the choices they made with the information they had at the time, and looking at it as this learning opportunity and this ability to have growth, then it would be all worth it. It would be all worth it for what we had to go through. To me, it's all an opportunity. It's all this possibility for, well, I did that, now I can do anything. Like, that's really how it felt.
I bet.
I set out to learn more about energy and the world and everything else. Okay, this lady wasn't crazy. If she can talk to angels and spirits, damn it, I'm going to figure out how to do that too. I don't believe that somebody is more special than the other. It's about belief and perspective and the willingness to be open to it. So I set out on a journey. I set out on a seeking journey. I started connecting with different people with different perspective of the world and how we're all connected. My world just kept getting bigger, which is amazing.
Because he did a great job of probably shrinking your world, I would imagine.
100%.
You talk about in your story there of how you got smaller and you thought, oh, this is perfect. We're going to get to know each other. We're going to have some intimacy again, reset. We're going to have a mulligan. We're going to have a do-over. You're going to have all this stuff he used as manipulation to keep you isolated, to keep you under his control.
Yes, exactly. There was a period of time where he was in my phone, in my ear, literally 24/7, because I felt so guilty that he couldn't be home with us for a period of time, that I was trying to keep him part of the family. And he used that. And I didn't have thoughts without him. And I couldn't do anything essentially in that bubble. I couldn't have feelings. I couldn't get upset. I couldn't process. And I didn't understand what that was doing to me psychologically, because when you're in it, you can't see it. It's only once you start to come out of it that you realize how messed up it really was.
So you told me that you've remarried now.
Yes, I have. And people think that's crazy. I know.
Yes, thank you. The elephant in the room. How the heck do you rebound from that? How do you go from that toxic, vile relationship? You can't trust a man again. I'm guessing, again, speculating here.
Correct.
I have a daughter. I have a wife. I have sisters. I'm just imagining what they would feel like if they were you, by the way. So that's why I'm talking the way I'm talking.
Wrong.
Okay. I just don't want to overstep or overshare there. If you're my sister, let's say, and you come to me and you're like, bro, listen, this is what happened. You know, Darren was just a tool. I don't know the guy's name, and it doesn't matter. So Darren just is the first name that popped into my head. You came to me and listen, I don't know what's going on here. It just doesn't feel right. Here's what happened. And my immediate reaction would be like, leave, like go. Couldn't. And I get that. But now that you have left, because you're in Oregon now, not in Colorado.
Correct.
You meet, I'm going to jokingly say here that now I am joking. Prince Charming comes along. How much of an uphill climb does he have to win over Amanda's heart?
Well, I will tell you, it was not expected to meet or even start dating. I was not looking. I was not on online dating sites. I thought I had young kids.
Really? Your Tinder profile? I mean, I thought you sent that to us. No? Oh, my bad.
No, it's not a thing that I was even on my radar. My free time consisted of, I'm going to take the kids to the playground. I was a full-time solo single mom of 3 boys in the middle of a pandemic. There was no dating happening. I was seeking out people I'm going to look for spiritual growth. I'm going to learn energy healing. I'm going to try to understand how trauma affects the body, how trauma affects emotional and mental and spiritual paths. I want to learn for my own healing. And I want to also have the information to be able to help other people in a different way too. While I can share what I did, I want to be able to help people after the fact. After we get out of these situations, we have a lot of things to unravel in our systems. And taking those classes and learning all of those things, I was connecting with different types of people. And I was connecting with people in a very different way because we were looking at everything we'd all been through in an attempt to understand ourselves, in an attempt to help release those stored emotions and help us repattern beliefs and all of the things that we do when we're looking at why we made the choices we made and how do we release judgment and how do we release shame and all of that. Part of that, I went to a workshop in Banff, and entirely synchronistically, they forgot that I was coming because I was coming from the US side, and they didn't actually have a hotel room for me. Only person who didn't have a roommate was the one male attending this workshop. I said, hey, do you mind 2 beds and all that? And he said, no problem. And we spent the next 3 days spending as much time together as possible, talking about everything. He's not my husband. The world changes when we're open for it. Connecting with him was the first time that I felt emotionally safe with a man. And I didn't even know that was a thing I didn't understand before. I didn't know that that was a thing that existed. Back even from my own father through my entire teenage years and every man I had ever been with, I didn't even know emotional safety was possible, let alone what it meant. I had been emotionally closed down myself. I was always focused on the intellect and always focused on the thing to do and what does this look like. I had been facing a lot of that own stuff within myself, and I had been opening myself up to reconnect in an emotional way and reconnect in a spiritual way. When I met a man who was spiritually and emotionally connected and available, all of a sudden it opened for a different type of connection. And I felt like I was seen and held in a way that I had never known was possible or even know to ask for. It shifted something in me to understand what partnership actually is. And I was open to seeing where it went because I felt like I could see him on a different level. I could understand his emotions. If he's upset upset today, I feel like I can see right through him. We're connected in that way. Even if he's stewing on something, I can give him a minute, but I always know something is going on, and he doesn't hide it from me. He's not living a double life. It's literally impossible. We both work from home, and he's seeing the way he's with my children now too, who now have a stepfather who's emotionally available. They're 3 boys. And this is in a world where most men are not emotionally connected or available. And most men are told you can't cry, go do the thing. You just have to go be a provider and all of that. He's an example of something very, very different. He's a poet and an author. His entire purpose in life is basically the opposite of most men out there. I felt like the universe gave me an opportunity, again, in a different way, to build a relationship based on something completely foreign to me before. I took it, and here we are.
Wow. Well, a couple of things come to mind. First thing that comes to mind is, what do you hope your boys see in you that they one day apply to the rest of their life?
I hope that my boys see, first of all, that I went through hell and I would do it again to make sure that they were safe. And I hope they know how much I value them, how much I love them, how much potential I see in them, that I would have never stopped fighting. I hope that they also understand sometimes what it takes is to keep going and to believe and to trust in yourself every single step in the way. Ultimately, I had to come back to trust in self in order to get out of there. I had to stop giving my power away to the lawyers and the evaluators and everybody else. And I had to say, no, I'm in the driver's seat now. And how are you going to help me get where I want to be? And I want them to know that that level of self-accountability, to recognize that I was contributing to the fact that we were still in this situation. I could have chosen to leave and I didn't. And now that I saw that, I needed to take full accountability for my part, not for his arrest, for the part I played in staying and the choices that I made from my lensing. And I had to take full accountability to make new choices and to ask for the help from the people who could help me and to bring to light all of the things that were hidden in the darkness in order to make that shift. I want them to go with their life in a way that they have self-accountability. If I can teach my boys one thing, it is self-accountability and their ability to self-reflect, to make and create their life.
So let's go back in time for a second. Are you able to time travel with me?
Absolutely.
No DeLorean. It's in the shop. Apparently it got sideswiped, needs a new fender. The windshield's a little cracked, flux capacitors on the fritz. But go back in time with me to let's say 2007. Put yourself there. What would you tell that version of yourself in 2007 that maybe 2024 doesn't know?
In 2007, I was dating my now ex-husband. We were just beginning to date. I was actually the other woman in his second marriage, and I was 19 and didn't understand what that was leading up to. I thought we were in love and that his marriage that he said was over was actually over. I would tell myself that to listen to my gut in a way that I did know how to do as a child, but I had stopped allowing myself to because I was so desperate for attention and love from somebody else. And I did not understand that I needed to give that to me and not look for it outside of self. And I didn't know how to do that yet. I also did have a little niggle here and there sometimes that something was off, and I refused to listen to it. There was tons and tons of red flags that I ignored, and I would explain away. We got married and had kids and all the things. And so I thought that I had won, that I was right, and that I helped or I healed or whatever story I had. 2007 me knew that something wasn't right and didn't want to listen. 2007 me is reminding the rest of me, even today, that I do know what is true for me, and I cannot let anybody talk me out of that.
Would the old version hear you?
2007 me thought that I knew everything because I was 18 and all grown up.
At 19, hello, who doesn't know everything at 19?
100%. I knew everything. I knew everything at 14. I was a full-grown adult by then. The only person I would have listened to at 19, 20, any of that was if I had literally shown up as myself. I didn't know something, nobody could have told me better. If I, in my 2024 self, showed up to my 19, 20-year-old self, that would be the only potential person that I would ever listen to.
I love that question, but I hate that question.
I know. You're like, but if I had only, right?
What if? And I hate the what if. I like to play the what if. Like, what if I could go back and do it? Like, I'm like, hey, Neil, go find Apple stock, put all your money there, Amazon stock,
but
you'd be ready to go.
I've played this game with myself. And the other thing that's hard with that is I would not have my 3 children. Had I walked away from that relationship, I wouldn't have my 3 children. And I wouldn't have the lessons and learning I have today. I wouldn't be the person person I am today, and I would have gone on a totally different life and may or may not have had kids even. That I can't wrap my head around. Every time I play that game with myself and why didn't I listen and why didn't I do this, it comes down to that I'm actually grateful at this point. And yes, it was hell. I'm grateful for the experience because I'm out safe and I get to be here to be an example of what is possible. And I get to have the perspective and awareness that I have. And I get to be the mom that I am with the boys that I have. And I wouldn't have any of that had I walked away back in 2007.
Can you forgive your ex-husband?
I already have. It's actually written in my book. It's one of the first things in the acknowledgments that was one of the biggest things he asked me for, actually, while we were still in communication, at least. He wanted me to forgive him. And I couldn't back then. I couldn't because I couldn't even wrap my head around any of it. Today, I see him as the wounded person that he is. I see him as choosing to stay in his trauma. And that's hard and that sucks. I can also get it in some perspective because how painful that is to face. And I don't have to forgive him in a way that invites him back into my life. I can forgive him and release him and hope that he goes through whatever process he does, this life or another, to repair that in himself. And I can hold space for that and I can let it go so that it doesn't affect me anymore.
There would be some people, I think some skeptics out there, some fence sitting folks, maybe couch sitting folks that would say, listen, Amanda, come on, sister. It's okay. That one we'll give you a mulligan on. You don't have to forgive him. What would you say to that?
I don't have to forgive him. That's true. Forgiving him is actually freeing me and it's freeing my children. It's freeing me from holding on to hate and anger. And it doesn't absolve anything. It doesn't give him a pass. And it doesn't invite him to participate in any of our lives. It does allow me to release the pain and the suffering. And it does allow me to help my kids release that part of themselves. He ultimately will stay their biological father. That's not something we get to undo. They will have their own healing and journey to go through because of it. Me being an example of what forgiveness can look like in basically worst case scenario type of thing, it shows the world that we can forgive and we can move on and we can see each other as humans who've experienced massive amount of trauma. We can hold boundaries against what's acceptable and what's not. We don't have to hold the hate and we don't have to hold the pain in the way that so many people do. I believe that's essentially the virus that's infecting humanity is all of the trauma. And so I'm not going to hold on to it and say, well, but I have every right to. I do have every right to, but I also choose to live in a way that opens up possibility to create a whole new way of operating. And I want my kids to see that as well. And so, yes, I could. I chose to forgive.
Would you say that's the greatest lesson you learned through this whole process was learning to forgive, or is there a greater lesson than that?
I think the greatest lesson that I learned beyond forgiveness, which is huge, is the remembering to trust myself first, 100% in every way, to listen to my inner guidance, to know who I am in every moment, to believe that I am capable of doing the seemingly impossible and having that faith to trust in myself and to take action from that place. It was like I got to come back home to me in a different way by stepping into this power place. And even though it was through the worst possible scenario, I got to see truly what could be possible and what you can come back from. That to me is one of the biggest lessons that I will never, ever forget. If I can do that, I can do anything.
You sound very powerful and you sound very strong. When the dark moments come and the self-doubt comes in, how do you find that resilience? How do you find that way to rise above the turbulence to continue to soar?
Everybody has. We all have our moments. We all have our emotions. We all sit in our, what am I doing with myself? Or what choices have I made? We have money stress, or we have job things, or we have any of life's stressors that come up. I now don't run from it. I used to shut my feelings off and I used to try to disassociate in some way. I don't like facing that. I don't know how to emotion. I wasn't raised in a way that taught me to process those emotions. I don't do that anymore. And I allow myself to feel them and I allow myself to look at them and try to understand more of what's coming up and why. And I get curious with myself and I get curious about why this is triggering me and what it means. I always use it as an opportunity and I have a different level of support than I used to have. I have different people in my circle that can help me. And usually when I get in those feels, the opportunity just hits me in a moment and I have an understanding that I didn't have before about myself, about the whole point of it all. And usually when that shift happens, all of a sudden I get excited again because there's something new that I've learned that I need to go share with somebody else. And so it's not that sadness doesn't happen and it's not that the dark moments don't happen, but they always bring me a gift in a new way. And so I don't run from them like I used to.
See, and I think that's powerful again, is to say, okay, the darkness is going to come. Okay, fine. I'm going to have a nightlight. I'm going to have a flashlight. I'm going to have my whoopee. I'm going to have whoopie's your blanket, maybe. I'm going to have my stuffed animal. I'm going to have my things around me to make sure that I can get through this. And I think that's powerful too. Well, Amanda, help us with this. Where can folks go to get a copy of the book?
So it's on Amazon. You you can go to the sextraffickerswife.com and I've got all the links posted, but it's available on all platforms through Amazon, ebook, paperback, audiobook, all the things. So if you want a copy of the book, that's the best place.
There is one more place. I get it. You're kind of nervous being on here today. A little nerves have probably gotten the best of you in some respects, right?
I've been interviewed many times at this point, truthfully.
I was teasing. There is one more place. We're going to have it actually at opspodcast.com/books that I love. It's going to be up towards the top. So you did forget that place, but it's okay. I mean, the nerves probably got to you a little bit, right?
Well, I appreciate you promoting that. I do.
Well, absolutely. It's our gift to you to say, hey, we value what you brought today. Around Christmas time, I always call attention to that specific page. If somebody's an avid reader and they're looking for a cool book to pick up, maybe for a loved one, or, just maybe want to read a book themselves. I think book reading is fun. I just don't enjoy doing it. I'd rather have scorpions crawl all over me. I do enjoy a good audiobook. So it is on Audible.
It is. And I am the one speaking. So that was a whole project to do. And I will say there was a couple of months where there was a pretty messed up chapter, but it's fixed now. So I made quite a bit of money before anybody told me. So,
Well, so speaking of chapters, is there a specific chapter that you were like, man, I don't want to write this one? What was that one?
Yes. I don't remember the exact chapter name. I transcribed the text conversation between my ex and the undercover agent in the book. Doing that transcription where I was literally writing it, my whole body tensed up. I was nauseous. I had a response that told me there was still stuff stored in my body. That was probably the hardest chapter to write.
I often say when you walk in other people's shoes, you really get a different perspective on life. For having a young woman walk through what you've walked through it's just so compelling. And I would imagine you're not on an island. You're not isolated. You're not the only woman that has ever walked through this.
No, I'm not. And since publishing my book, I've had people come and reach out to me and say, you wrote my story. You lived my life. I didn't think anybody else would have ever experienced that. Research we did as we were getting ready to market the book and put it out into the world, you try to find comparable books, essentially, and you try to use that to help build it. We could not find a single person who had ever written the wife story in this case. It does not exist. It just became more and more important that I do so, and I do so widely and loudly as I can. I am not the only one by a long shot.
So what would be your message to somebody right now who's listening, who maybe has, like I was saying, maybe a sister, maybe a cousin, maybe a girlfriend, maybe a acquaintance from work, coworker that may fit into your story? What counsel would you give that friend or that family member, maybe walking through this or in the infant stage of it?
If you know somebody who's going through hell like I did, whether it's an abusive relationship, whether it's sex trafficking, whether it's sex abuse, whether it's child abuse, any of the things, most damaging thing you can do is have them feel further isolated. The amount of people who said, you can leave him, when I went, no, I can't. The amount of people I felt judged from because I stayed, or that they wanted to ask questions, they wanted to dig into it, or they wanted to put their perspective, made me isolate even more. All I needed was for somebody to get that I couldn't leave at that point in time, that I was doing everything I possibly could to keep my family safe. And that's what I believed I needed to do in order to create that. I think that's something that's really, really hard for people. You're like, hello, don't you see what's in front of you? I want to help you get out of this situation. What happens then is the person feels really, really judged and they shut you out even more. Then they don't even have your support when they're ready. If you allow this person to just vent if they need to and be an ear for them to talk to, or just to know that you're a safe place, then when they are ready, because you can't make somebody ready to leave, you can't force it. But when they're ready and when they see it, they know they have somebody that can help them strategize, listen to them, whatever it is. If you've allowed them to isolate further, you're really not going to be able to come back from that.
We talked to Rebecca Bender. I don't know if you know who she is, but she was actually sex trafficked, I think, for 7 years in Vegas, of all places. And she talks about that quite honestly in her book, how isolation is the key to all this.
Yes.
Is if they can get you alone, if they can get you in their little sphere, in their little ecosystem, they can manipulate you. They can do just insane amount of stuff. And I'm always thinking to myself, Rebecca Bender, we've had another young lady come on from Hawaii. All of you seem like really smart girls. And I'm like, how could you not see it? Again, when you're trapped and you're isolated and that's all you know, it's easy to stand again from the sidelines or from the couch, not stand on the couch, we're not supposed to, but sit on the couch and point and say, well, come on, you should have been smarter. You should have been able to realize and see it, but you can't.
You can't.
No, you can't. No, and I believe that wholeheartedly.
They're literally programming your mind to believe that they are your safety. The only safe person I can talk to after my ex-husband was arrested was him. Creates a trauma bond, and you actually focus on protecting your abuser, they're the only ones who understand you. And your brain is wiring you to keep yourself safe. That's how we're designed as humans. And so if your safety exists in the person who's causing the trauma, it's this circle and a feedback loop, and you don't know how to get out because it's too unsafe to get out. That person is causing it. So you justify it to yourself over and over. And that continues the cycle.
I think that's the damage. Well, again, Amanda, I'm glad you're out. I'm glad you're free from that. I'm glad, hopefully there isn't too many ill effects. Hopefully there's no lingering effects. And it sounds like you really kind of kicked into Mama Bear hyperdrive.
I did.
I'm thankful that we got to connect. Before
Absolutely.
we let you go, we've had some serious stuff. I feel like we have had a little giggling. That's my fault because I'm tended when things get intense, I like to make a joke. We do like to do this thing at the end of the show called Senseless. It's the silly 6 questions that we ask. Don't worry, you don't have to answer all 6. They're flight-themed questions. So here we are. So Senseless, I have a cup. I'm going to roll a die. There is a die. There's proof that there is a die. So I'm going to roll on your behalf, even though you're just up the road in Bend, which is still exciting to me, by the way. I don't know why, but I am still excited by that because I think it's just the time zone thing. I don't feel like I have to be groggy on the flight. Do you love to fly, by the way? Are you a big flyer? Do you love to fly?
I'm not a big flyer. I do enjoy traveling. And, in my future self, I would love to do more of it and go speak on bigger stages.
There you go.
I have big dreams.
Winnipeg's calling, I heard. This is the first place in Canada I thought of. Sorry. She has some Canadian roots, if you couldn't tell. So, all right, here we go. Senseless, rolling on your behalf. And you got this amazing question number 5. There it is. Proof that it is 5. So you find yourself sitting in first class. So I don't know if you've ever flown first class, but it is pretty amazing. Once. Okay. Well, I think I'm on my 3rd first class flight. You find yourself sitting in first class next to someone famous. Who would you want it to be?
The 2 that come to mind, and maybe I have to pick one, but it's Oprah Winfrey or Ellen DeGeneres. I want to tell them my story, and I want their audience to hear what I have to say.
Well, I feel like Oprah would want to hear your story. So maybe Oprah's like the aisle seat or like the middle seat, and like Ellen's the window. Like somehow you lost the flip on the window. Well, Amanda, thank you again. I mean this. Thank you so much for what you shared and what you brought to us today. I really appreciate you for doing that.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. As we come in for a landing today, I don't even know what that was. It's rare to me that I walk away from a show scratching my head, kind of speechless. Right now, I'm in that moment. I don't know about you. I'm in that moment. I want to go back and rewind it. I invite you to do likewise. The trauma, the gaslighting, the kids. I mean, there's so many different facets and elements we could have gotten to. That was a heartfelt story. Guys, if you have not gotten her book, What is Your Problem? Get a hold of it. Read it, send her a note and tell her what you thought of it. And if you walk away and you don't have a changed perspective, I think you might need to go to the doctor and get your pulse checked, get your heart checked, because I really think that book in the right hands can really change lives and should change lives. I don't often promote a book, but I feel like that's one we got to get a hold of, and I hope you're going to do likewise. So here's my challenge to you today. Who's that person right now that needs to hear what Amanda had to say? I bet you know somebody. I bet you do. Think about that. Put it in their hand this week. As we go, don't forget this. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. And stay tuned till next week when we walk in other people's shoes.